My name is Mara Morris. I'm the Assistant Division Director here at the Department of Arts and Culture. I'm going to provide you today with helpful hints and tips, a breakdown of the application requirements, as well as at the end, we'll go through a step-by-step overview of the application process. Once again, I'm going to ask that everyone remain on mute. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will stop sharing periodically to go through the chat, make sure we're able to answer questions that have come up. But let's just, for the sake of everyone's time to get through the presentation, keep yourselves on mute, and rather than unmuting and asking your questions directly, just drop them in the chat. I'm also going to put some links in the chat at the end of the presentation so that you'll have some of the information that we're sharing with you on your screen. As we begin, I want to pause and acknowledge that the County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, the Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Quiche Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission website at lanaic.lacounty.gov. So, jumping right in, the goal of the Community Impact Arts Grant Program is to support the complex arts ecology of LA County by increasing access and strengthening the quality of arts programming wherever it happens. That can be in health and human services, criminal and restorative justice, community and economic development, workforce development, and environmental justice, just to name a few of the types of organizations that have been funded in the past. CIAG recognizes the value of the arts as a vital tool for civic problem solving across a range of issue areas. It is designed to promote and highlight cross-sector strategies and support organizations that provide high-quality arts programs as part of their larger mission to provide services to individuals and communities outside of the arts. So the program enables these organizations to deliver a wide variety of cultural services to county residents that support arts and culture throughout the region. By mapping the organizations we have funded through this program, we have found that CIAG orgs are offering art services in areas that are not typically served by the traditional nonprofit arts organizations. If you are a traditional nonprofit arts organization, you are eligible for the organizational grant program and you are ineligible for CIAG. So that's the biggest, most important piece of the puzzle in determining eligibility. So organizational eligibility. If you have any questions about this, I highly encourage you to attend our small group office hours that'll be held on Monday afternoons. We just want to make sure that someone is indeed eligible for the program before spending any of their time working on an application. CIAG funds organizations whose primary mission is to provide services other than arts programming. Again, like I said, non-arts organizations are eligible for this program. We determine this by more than 50% of the applicant's organizational budget is devoted to non-arts related programs. And that is a number that you self-identify and attest to in the application. Organizations must be a 501c3 nonprofit or a municipality, a tribal government, or have a Model A fiscal sponsor agreement with a California nonprofit. You must have an operating budget of more than $25,000 annually. Your principal offices must be in LA County, and this is demonstrated by the address on your organization's 990. So if you're an organization that hasn't, like, is part of an umbrella org that is maybe a state organization or a national organization, oftentimes that means your chapter is not eligible for CIAG because we do need you to prove your LA residency. If you are a nonprofit, you must have a functioning board with more than half of its members residing in California. Additionally, you need at least 2 consecutive years of arts-based programming. Virtual is okay, and 4 arts-based programs per year. So if you are funding, you know, one big event like a festival or an art walk or something, but it only occurs once per year, that also it would be ineligible for CIAG. Failure to meet any of the eligibility requirements for both the organization as well as the project will result in a disqualification of the application. So please make sure that you download and review the CIAG guidelines thoroughly. And if you have, again, any questions about your eligibility, you can send an email to ciag@arts.lacounty.gov. I'm monitoring that inbox and will respond directly, or attend the small group office hours sessions. Okay. Let's go to what is eligible. CIAG provides project-based funding, not general operating support. So it's a 1-year grant. Make sure that your project fits within the timeline of the 25-26 CIAG grant cycle. That's July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. Competitive applications will show that they are providing arts programming for communities that otherwise would not have access to the arts. And if you are providing arts ed programming, it must take place either outside of school or after regular school hours. A little bit about some ineligible projects. They include scholarly research, anything taking place outside of LA County, programs for private members of a club or a group that's not open to the general public, as well as the purchase of capital expenses. Travel outside of LA County can't be included as part of your grant-funded project expenses. However, transportation expenses for travel within the county is allowed. CIAG also does not fund hospitality, endowments, or cash reserves, projects that are religious or proselytizing in nature, as well as university presenting series or general funding for museums or galleries. Housing and hospitality expenses can be included as part of your one-to-one cash match requirement, but that means that your organization is responsible for carrying the costs of hospitality or housing on your match side of the budget as opposed to the CIAG funded side of the budget. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay. Oh. What's new this year? That was strange. A blank slide. So there have been a few changes to the application in terms of eligibility and requirements. We're pleased to announce that tribal governments located within LA County that are either federally recognized as listed in the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Federal Acknowledgement or California Native American tribes as listed by the State of California Native American Indian or Heritage Commission are now eligible to apply. And there's just, it's as simple as clicking those buttons in the eligibility profile as well as on the application itself. And then we just cross-reference to those lists that were mentioned. And then a change for all applicants. There's now the maximum of 2 letters of recommendation or reviews written in the past 12 months that speak directly to your arts programming are strongly encouraged. What that means is we want your letters of recommendation be dated so that we can see that they were in fact written in the past 12 months. Just the same as last year and years prior, both letters need to be attached into one or combined into one PDF and uploaded where required in the application. If you fail to meet this requirement, it's not, you're still eligible. Your application will still move forward. We're probably going to spend a lot less time chasing down letters of recommendation because they are strongly encouraged but not required. So you just need to get it in your application, and if they don't meet the requirements, then our panelists will not have them for review during the panel review process. I will stress that the letters of recommendation are just a really exceptional opportunity for your community that you are supporting to speak directly to the impact of the projects or programs you provide. Heartfelt letters that come from individuals who have been impacted by your programs go a really, really long way. Panelists always appreciate them and always notice when they are missing. So I just encourage you to get them in. The other change this year is the Levine Act compliance. This is a state mandate. It is not something that we decided last minute to throw in just because. It is something that all grant programs across the state are dealing with right now. Ultimately, we created a form that's going to be just part of the application. It's one of the tasks that you will have to fill out and attest to. It is going to require that you collect some information from your board and or leadership. So there's a lot of information on our website, including the questions that you will be asked in SM Apply, so that you can start preparing and collecting that information from your board. We'll go into greater detail on the actual task and questions in a moment, so I'll just leave it there, but this is a requirement. If you do not complete the task, you will not be able to submit your application. Okay, so here is a list of the required support materials that will need to be updated into the SM Apply program. The agent declaration form is the new Levine Act compliance. It's ultimately a very simple yes or no form. If you answer no to everything, then you just fill it out no, 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 and you submit it and it's done. If the answer to any of the questions is yes, then you have the opportunity to fill in a little bit more details about what you're saying yes to and what the information is. Again, I have some slides where I will go into drill down into greater detail. I will say we're also hosting application workshops specifically for the Levine Act compliance piece, where our administrative team, who is kind of spearheading this whole process, they will be able to answer questions directly in those workshops. So I encourage you to also sign up and attend one of those if you are able. Okay, so about the other pieces of support materials. Your artistic documentation is ultimately going to be one of the strongest parts of your application, where panelists can see directly what your arts programs look like, how they, if you have video or if you have photos, it's really always wonderful to see your participants in the art making process, as opposed to just a picture of a painting or a picture of ceramics. But seeing the process of the art making is always impactful. Use that real estate. Don't, we allow up to 2. I highly encourage you to use both and not just submit one. It's an important piece for panelists to see. Additionally, your financial documentation, we require a federal form 990. It must be for fiscal year ending on or after December 31st, 2022. So if your tax year ends June 30th, you must submit a tax form for ending June 30th, 2023. We will not accept a June 30th, 2022 990 for this cycle. So keep that in mind in terms of your timeline and what you need to prepare to get a full application submitted. Also, if your operating budget is over $2 million annually, you additionally need to submit an audit, and the fiscal years need to match on both of your financial forms. So that information should look the same for the audit and the 990. We should be talking about the same fiscal year and the same operating budget for both. But again, the audit is only required for applicants with annual budgets of $2 million or more. Going back to the artistic documentation, we provide space for you to contextualize the submission. It includes like a title, location, artists, dates, participant impact. Just really try to use up all of the real estate we provide to explain your programs and to explain the impact of those programs. And then, let's see. Optionally, you can include promotional materials. Promotional materials should not be included as your artistic documentation. Marketing materials are not artistic documentation. So when I get to the artistic documentation side, we'll go a little bit into greater detail then. Okay, now I'm gonna explain a little bit about how grant award amounts are calculated. The most important thing to keep in mind is that the amount that you will ultimately be awarded is much less than the amount that you submit as your request amount in the application. Anyone who's a returning applicant knows this very well. So an organization's request amount is multiplied by their panel score in order to determine the maximum request amount. And then final awards are determined by dividing the maximum funding, that is, we have $750,000 to expend annually on the CIAG program. We spend it to the penny. And what we do is we take every maximum request amount for applications that are ultimately being awarded funding, and we divide it by $750,000 and calculate all of those maximum award amounts down in order to spend down the $750,000 in full. So this is an example of how that calculation worked out in real numbers this last cycle. You are able to request a maximum of $20,000 in the application. I always recommend that you request the maximum amount of $20,000 because you will not receive $20,000. No one does. So what happened in this scenario is someone requested $20,000. They received a panel score of 94, which is an incredibly high, and like that's a great score from the panel. And then you multiply 20,000 by 94% and you get $18,800. In this last cycle, there were 85 granted organizations. So we took $750,000 and we divided it amongst those 85 organizations. And this $18,800 maximum fundable request was calculated down to $10,528. All grantees in this most recent cycle received 56% of their maximum request amount. Cutoff scores are determined annually by the arts commissioners. The cutoff score was 75 for the 24-25 CIAG cycle. So if you received a panel score of 75 or above, you were awarded a grant and were part of the 85 grantees. And if you received a panel score of 74.9 or lower, you were not funded. Oh, circles. Okay, great. Switching gears, I'm going to go into a little bit about the department's work with cultural equity and inclusion. I think many of you are familiar with this. So without spending too much time on the nitty-gritty, the process began in 2015. The Board of Supervisors adopted a motion to create a framework for advancing cultural equity among the region's arts and culture sector. In 2016, the department began their process in full. There were a number of town halls throughout the county, as well as stakeholder focus groups, research, and an advisory committee. In 2017, the Cultural Equity and Inclusion Report was released by the Arts Commission. It summarized the 13 main recommendations that rose out of the town hall process. And then subsequently, the Cultural Equity and Inclusion Report was approved by the board. In 2019, the department began a process to put together the county's first cultural policy. The cultural policy acts as a framework for cross-sector work and infusing arts and culture amongst all of the county's departments, not just the Department of Arts and Culture. In 2020, the policy passed by the Board of Supervisors, as did a motion to establish an anti-racist policy agenda, which is now the basis for the Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative, ARDI. And in 2022, the board adopted both the Cultural Policy Strategic Plan and the Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan for implementing their goals. And the goals are kind of listed here on the screen. Improved educational outcomes, better physical and mental health care and outcomes, increased housing and housing stability, meaningful employment opportunities, and an equitable and fair criminal justice system. So these last two pieces, the Cultural Policy Strategic Plan and the ARDI initiative, together provide a foundation for pushing our vision further as we continue to strive and foster diversity, equity, access, and inclusion in all of the work that we do throughout our department. The Community Impact Arts Grant stems directly from the Cultural Equity and Inclusion Initiative. So how you address your organization's own DEI work within the communities that you serve and your arts programming provides a large role in panelists' review of your application. In 2021, the Board of Supervisors approved ongoing funding at $750,000 annually to sustain the CIAG program for the in the long term. Before that, we had been going to the board every single year to request the amount in our annual budget, but now it is just an ongoing program. So this motion signified a recognition of the impact of the program and the county's ongoing investment in the arts and in its cultural policy. So we just say all of that to let you know that how you address your responses to the DEI questions, which plays into a lot of your narrative in different ways, is important, and it is reviewed closely. So on your screen right here is the review criteria across five different areas. This information is available in the guidelines. It is available in the application itself. And we also have this resource on our website in the CIAG application page. So make sure you review all of these 5 areas, as well as the point value awarded to each to make sure you're adequately addressing this in your application. It is the basis of how panelists score and your score directly affects your final award amount, as we discussed earlier. So this is a really important piece of the puzzle. These are a couple examples of CIAG funded grantees that offered really strong cross-sector programs that support their communities through arts and culture. They highlight the demonstrated success of their projects in part through the images that they shared. They both shared visual representation of the populations they serve. That's really helpful to panelists. You know, in this lower slide, the faces are blurred to protect protected populations. That is not a problem. But I think it's important to see people engaging in art making and processes together. And you can find creative ways to share images of this nature as opposed to just static artwork. Okay, so now let's get into this Levine Act because it's new this year, and I think it has the opportunity to be a little bit of a stumbling block, but I think ultimately it's pretty straightforward. So the County of Los Angeles requires all applicants of Department of Arts and Culture grant programs to complete a contribution and agent declaration form within SM Apply to comply with the Levine Act. That's SB 1439. This is new California legislation effective as of January 1st, 2023, that prohibits certain appointed and elected local officers, which includes members of the Board of Supervisors, from taking part in decisions about awarding contracts, grants, licenses, or permits if that officer received a political contribution of more than $250 in the last 12 months from a bidder, proposer, or applicant. So what that means is if anyone on your board of directors or your paid leadership, there's very specific definitions of who we're asking to submit reports on this. If any of them made political contributions to the Board of Supervisors, we need to know. If the answer is yes, you had someone paying, you know, contributing to the what am I trying to say? Contributing to the political contributions of a Board of Supervisors member, you're still eligible to apply to CIAG. Answering yes to any of the questions and providing information about political contributions does not disqualify you from the application of CIAG. You just have to, for transparency, report it. And then part of our approval process leading up to awarding contracts is the Board of Supervisors votes on the recommended awardees, and a specific Board of Supervisor would have to abstain from the vote for an awarded applicant if they made political contributions. It's a lot of words. I hope that made sense. That's what we're asking for in a nutshell. It's a very simple yes, no question and answer in the application portal. And again, we will be having workshops directly to deal with any specific questions you have about it. To comply with the Levine Act, California state law requires that you disclose information about contributions made by certain individuals, so paid employees, paid agents, or paid board members that represent your organization. And then you'll just disclose that in the application by completing the declaration form. Information is being collected for transparency and compliance purposes only. Reporting contributions, again, will not disqualify you from CIAG. Your answers also will not be part of the panelist review and scoring of your applications. The entire task will not be visible to panelists. So the information is just for transparency purposes, and admin will use it to make sure that no board member is voting on an applicant who made contributions to them. Failure to respond to the required questions will result in disqualification of your application. So, and there will not be a grace period for completing the requirement. It will be due on the final deadline of CIAG, just like the rest of the application is. Applicants should be prepared to dedicate extra time to the process of reviewing the form, collecting and assessing the data, and preparing accurate responses, because you will have to reach out to potentially your board, as well as your paid leadership. And then also, if you hire lobbyists, that would be part of the paid agents. So, additional resources, including the questions that you'll be asked in the application, a frequently asked questions document, and registration links for the informational workshop sessions about the Levine Act are all available on our website. If you go to our website and then go to funding, in the drop-down menu, there's an area for the Levine Act. Also, if you just have the CIAG page bookmarked or something, and you just usually click through to that, the Levine Act is linked from the CIAG page as well. Okay, I'm gonna go through a couple more slides, and then we'll stop for round one of questions. So all of the CIAG applications are reviewed by staff for baseline eligibility. And once we determine that your organization as well as your proposed project are eligible for the program, then the application is reviewed by panelists. If any of you have served on a grants panel, you know it's the quickest way to learn about what makes a successful application, because you just need to find the answers to the questions as asked. You want them clearly stated, you want to see what the proposed project is, and you want to know how it addresses the goals of the CIAG program. Applications are reviewed and scored by a grant peer review panel made up of artists, arts professionals, community members, and others with knowledge and professional qualifications in the arts and with familiarity of the Los Angeles region's arts sector. All applicants are able to schedule a panel feedback call. I provide panel feedback starting in July, so as soon as you are awarded, you can schedule time with me to go through what panelists said. We distill all of the salient points into a one sheet for you, and I'm happy to send that out to anyone who is interested in what their panel feedback was. It can, ultimately help you raise your panel review score in future cycles, so do take advantage of that. And we are always seeking new panelists. So if you are interested in serving as a panelist, send me an email. Note that if you are applying to CIAG, you cannot serve on a CIAG panel in that same cycle. However, you can serve on an organizational grant program panel, and OGP applicants frequently serve on the CIAG panels. Here is a link for nominating yourself or someone else to be a panelist, and I can also drop that in the chat at the end of our workshop today. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little beat and go through the chat and see if there are any questions I can answer. I'll try to get through these, but if I miss yours, I'll give you time to come off mute and ask it directly. So thank you all for being here. Can you expand more on the artistic documentation requirement? I'm going to get to that right after the Q&A. We're going to jump into the actual SM Apply portal, as well as specific different tasks in the application itself. So we'll hold on that for now, because I think I'll get to some of those answers in a little bit. Yes, the CIAG grant is a one-year grant program, which means that if you currently have a 24-25 CIAG grant, you must apply again this fall in order to receive a 25-26 CIAG grant. So it takes you know, almost a year, a good 8 or 9 months to go from the point of application to the point of contracting and award announcements. So in that time you're applying, you are a current grantee, but you should apply every year. We encourage you to do so. Okay, per the Levine Act, who are defined as county officials other than members of the Board of Supervisors? That is listed in the FAQ, as well as I think when you open up your application, there's going to be in the Levine Act task more specific information. So we do define it in the application for the purpose of CIAG. The BOS, the Board of Supervisors, is who we are most interested in. Some of the other agents are like the sheriff. They're basically individuals who are elected as opposed to appointed. And that is because elections often contribute, we have campaign contributions for elections. And I think, you know, taking a big step back about why the Levine Act is happening, if I could crystallize it, it was to try to handle or deal with and address pay to play for like developers. Obviously, it's trickling down in unintended ways to grant programs for arts and culture organizations. It was not designed to, there is not a problem with pay to play in this grant program because we have the panel format, and the Board of Supervisors isn't cherry picking who they want contracts awarded to. We go through a panel process in order to solve for that problem, right? Regardless, it's a state mandate and there's no getting around it. We just have to deal with it now. This is why we tried to design the form or the task in SM Apply to be as simple as possible and direct as possible. I really encourage you to open it up and start looking at it as soon as possible. Don't wait for the last possible night to do this, because it's not a form that any one grant writer can do on their own. It requires you to communicate with your board, with your paid staff. So it's something to just start thinking about sooner rather than later, and definitely attend one of the Levine Act workshops in order to get more specific questions addressed. Are these funds in any way connected to NEA funds? I want to make sure we don't match with federal funds. No, they are not. So the Community Impact Arts Grant is all is part of our annual ongoing county budget. It is County of Los Angeles taxpayer dollars that funds CIAG. So you absolutely are encouraged to include state funding, federal funding, or other you know, private donors or private foundation funding in your cash match area of the budget. It's a great question. Under ineligibility, could you please expound on major equipment? Yeah, like stage lights, a new set of computers for staff, anything that is a capital expense, like building a building or putting supplies into the building for use year over year over year. Those are all ineligible expenses. CIAG funding should be for an annual arts program. Supplies required to complete that program are absolutely admissible. They are usually more like the actual artistic components of a visual arts project or something of that nature, as opposed to like new lighting and sound equipment for a dance performance. The equipment would be ineligible, but the costumes or, you know, artist fees for that performance would be eligible. I hope that answered it. Oh, here we go. Would a computer for a digital arts program fall under major equipment? Yes, it would. I think if this is really what you're raising money for is computer equipment, maybe let's schedule some time and so I can ask a couple more questions and drill down. But by and large, we're not looking to fund equipment. But we would be funding the artist fees related to the program, and you could have the equipment be in the matching side, if that makes sense. Okay, I think those were all the questions that I see. Is there any other questions that that were in there that I missed? You can unmute yourself now, or I will just keep going. This just popped in. We are bringing an exhibition that was presented in the past, but with an increased scope into a wider audience. The exhibition was supported by the Department of Arts and Culture in the past. Can we still apply? Marina, let's you and I send an email to the CIAG at arts.lacounty.gov email address, and we can schedule some time. I think I'd rather hear more about it and make sure I'm answering fully and accurately. For an organization that has multiple arts programs, would CIAG prefer to fund one program or general arts programming? That's a really great question. Here's what I'll say. Every single section of the application has a very specific character count maximum. So you're not going to be able to go into great detail about all of your arts programs under the project narrative section. I think that would be too much of a stretch. You certainly will have time to talk about like your organization's philosophy and all of the different programs you do and how they serve your mission in the organizational narrative section. But I think ultimately it's your call, but my experience is that you're going to be able to more clearly and thoroughly articulate one unique project as opposed to all of the very many things that you do in a way that will be like satisfying to a panelist learning about you for the first time. So that's just my recommendation. Be mindful of character counts, and we'll get into that in a moment about like kind of best ways of working with SM Apply to make sure that you can not lose your information or do anything that's going to cause you to pull your hair out at the last possible minute. But treat the application as an opportunity to introduce yourself and your organization to a complete stranger, and you want them to understand what it is that you do as clearly as possible. So that is what I'll say about that. Okay, so I'm gonna hop into, I'll just keep rolling right along. Let's hop into the grant portal, SM Apply. Where are we? All CIAG applications, as well as the grant reports, and then required forms and materials, they are all submitted in SurveyMonkey Apply. The URL is up here at the top of the screen. And a couple of tips. If you are a returning grantee, log in using the same credentials as you used in prior cycles. And you can, once you've logged in, you can update your account information if necessary before beginning the application. I think a lot of times organizations create different logins for each individual who's working on an application, but it can get really confusing if you all don't have access to the current application you're working on. Also, the owner of the application is the only person who will be able to ultimately submit and finalize it. Collaborators can do just that. They can edit applications, they can add information in, take information out, but they won't be able to submit. So it's really important that you know who the owner is of the application. So at the 11th hour, you can actually get it submitted on time. We recommend that one organization has one login credentials that is shared amongst anyone in the organization who needs access to it. It's the cleanest way to make sure you all know what is happening and can all access the application. If you are new to the system, we highly recommend that you create one account for all users on behalf of your organization. When you go to the SM Apply portal, you're going to click on this green register button on the upper right side of the web page, and you start a new user account and profile. You must be registering as an organization. The way in which you fill out your eligibility profile and your organizational information will determine whether or not you are eligible for the Community Impact Arts Grant Program. After completing these steps, you'll be able to view the grant applications that are open and that you are eligible to apply for based on the user profile you created. Okay, make sure, I don't know that I've ever mentioned this in prior application workshops, but it did come to my attention that SM Apply defaults your, oh wait, is this the right, no, this is the next slide. Make sure that you update your time zone. So they default to some strange central or mountain time, which means that your deadline to submit will not be synced up with LA County. So once you've logged in, go ahead and go into your user setup, which you get to by your name on the upper right-hand corner. You click on your name. There'll be a drop-down menu where you can go to your account settings. And then in under account settings, go to preferences and select the option from the list that ends in Los Angeles for time zones. It's really quick and it'll just make things a lot simpler for getting in and out of the application and to have your deadline meet up with ours. Okay, so make sure to save your passport or your passwords, and anyone else that now or in the future needs to access your grant information will need that information. So when employees leave, you just have an SM Apply folder somewhere so that the username and password is readily available and the next person is not starting from scratch. We always recommend that you copy and paste your narrative answers from a Word document. Pay attention to the character counts, but then write in Word or whatever writing program you guys are using, and then copy and paste into the system so that you don't run the risk of forgetting to save something and losing a bunch of work. SM Apply is not our website, so sometimes there are technical issues that people run into that we might need reported to SM Apply's tech support team. In general, though, if you're having an issue with the system, reach out to ciag@arts.lacounty.gov, and we'll do our best to troubleshoot before we raise it up to the level of SM Apply. I strongly recommend that you submit your application early. Best case scenario, get everything in there and ready to submit 5 days before the deadline, or 3 days before the deadline, but just really don't wait until the deadline. The heartache of seeing applications that were very near completion and then someone just ran up to the 11:59 p.m. deadline, that's real and it happens every year, so don't let that be you. Okay, so beginning an online grant application. The first thing that you want to do once you have taken the steps to complete your user profile is take a look under programs, and you'll see all of the various grant programs that we have open right now. And you'll see that there's a green start button for CIAG. The CIAG 2526 application is what you will be submitting. When you are filling out the application, it is going to take some time. You might need to leave and come back over a course of a number of days. So just make sure as you're working to always hit save. And then the next time you log in, you'll be able to just continue on the application that's already in process. make sure you find the application that you were working on and continue that way. Don't get caught in opening up new applications. I've seen that happen. The system lets you open multiple applications in one cycle. This is because fiscally sponsored organizations are eligible to apply. So we might have one organization applying on behalf of a number of fiscally sponsored projects. So that's just something to keep in mind and look out for. Okay, so your application will be available in full with each section separated out in the task list when you log in. You can jump from task to task. You do not need to submit it all in order. However, there's logic built into the application itself. And so some tasks will be populated with information that you filled out earlier in the application. For example, under the CIAG project budget task, that's where it's going to ask you what your request amount is. You have to complete that task and mark it as complete in order for your project request amount to then be populated in your budget task. So it's just sort of that logic. So if you're having any issues and you think something is supposed to be filled out and if you're not seeing it, reach out to us, ciag@arts.lacounty.gov, so we can kind of help you troubleshoot. But it might be that you need to submit an earlier task. Once you've submitted a task, you can go back in and edit it. It's not until you have fully submitted the entire application in full that you can't go in and make changes. So the individual tasks can be submitted, and then I'll show you how to open them to either you can reset it, which is like a full wipe of all the information you earlier provided, or you can edit it, which will open it up, and then you can change what needs to be changed and resubmit. I will say that it's really important that you complete and submit your eligibility task first, because there's lots of information based on the type of organization that you report yourself to be. So you'll want that part to be done first. Also, make sure that you save often and ensure that the task is complete when you go back to the dashboard before moving on. On every single task, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, it'll give you the option to save. It'll give you the option to save and submit, or it'll give you the option to just go back. Make sure you're saving a lot. Also, once you have completed your application, even if all of these circles are completely filled in green because they are done and complete, your application still needs to be finally formally submitted. So don't forget to don't skip that part. Make sure your application is submitted. It'll be when you're on this home screen of the application, there'll be a submit button on the left-hand side once all of your tasks are filled out. Okay, so a little bit about project budgets. In the project budget task, the CIAG request amount that you entered earlier in the project request and organizational budget task is auto-filled. So again, if you're not seeing this right here, CIAG fund request, CIAG required match, this $20,000 should be auto-filled because you already filled out your project request task. And then meets or exceeds is at the bottom of the page. Basically, you must submit project expenses that add up to exactly the request amount, which in this case is $20,000. And then on the required match side, you must submit project expenses that are a minimum of $20,000. But if you have a $100,000 project and a $20,000 match, you're going to actually include required match expenses in excess of $80,000. So the required match must be at minimum a 1-to-1 match of your request amount, but it can be greater than that. It just can't be less. These errors will turn into, I think, yes. It'll either say yes or match or something of that nature if your numbers are adding up correctly. Don't add any commas, decimals, or dollar signs or any other symbols in the project budget, just straight numbers. It can get really finicky, so just make sure you're only adding in numbers in this section. Let's see. There's also budget expense explanations for you to go into a little bit of detail about your expenditures. If it's, if you're putting in all of your project expenses under artist fees, even if you talk about your artists in more detail and how they are paid in the narrative section, put a bullet point here in the budget explanations that kind of talks about like how many people are being paid. How is that wage determined? I'm getting a note that my internet is unstable, so I just want to make sure you guys can all hear me. Let me know if I've frozen or something of that nature. Don't forget to skip the budget expense explanations. Panelists always refer to them. Oh, and here is a little bit of the project budget income. Someone asked a question earlier about if federal funds could be used here. Absolutely, yes. The government lines, federal, state, and city is automatically going to include your request amount, but you can add to that in order if you're including other federal expenses or other state or city expenses, but you can't include other county, not expenses, other county revenues in the government line. And again, there's room for income explanations, just like there was for budget explanations, and make sure you use that real estate. Okay, application tips on narrative questions. First and foremost, copy and paste from a Word document. Just make note of what the character limits are. It's again, character, not word limits. More is not necessarily better in this section. You just want to be clear. You want to be speaking to be understood. This is not the place for hyperbole. This is not the place for marketing. It's just providing facts and information about your organization that allow panelists to understand the vision and long-term planning that you are laying out in your application. Highlight your organizational goals. How is your programming unique? Who do you serve? What do you uniquely provide to LA County residents or a specific population? How have you been addressing your challenges? Everyone has them. Don't shy away from them. It's more important to hear about how you address them and how you persevere. It's a very compelling always to read. How is your staff and leadership trained or qualified to lead the project? If you are hiring outside artists, who are they? What are your requirements? Be transparent. We want to know what will help you achieve the goals of your project. And we want to make sure you take your time to craft a project narrative with a plan that details how you will be using CIAG funding, who it will serve, how you will evaluate the program and achievements of the project you produce, and what you how do you define achievement? What is a success? What does that look like? What metrics are you using? But those evaluation pieces are important, as well as how you define success, just stated very plainly and directly. Oh boy, we just went through all of that. Avoid hyperbole. And here, connect the dots. Thank you, cute little picture. Mostly be clear and concise. There are character limits, so you should not be repeating yourself ever in the application. If you find that you are saying something that was already stated prior, take a look at those two sections and make sure you're not missing a question that is being asked and failing to address it. Okay, so how do you describe your community? This is really important. There is a section where we ask you to describe your community and your audience, or who you are serving. And you'll also be asked to describe the activities and strategies that you have implemented or are planning to implement in the future around the values of cultural equity and inclusion in the arts. Definitely make sure you take a look at the guidelines, but also more specifically the application instructions to review what precisely we are asking for. Everyone is going to answer this differently based on your unique organization. So provide as much detail as you can, paint the picture, and just always try to be specific rather than just providing the demographics of the county as a whole. Just saying we serve the county of LA and here's the demographic makeup of the county. That actually shows that you don't know who your audience is, because no organization is actually doing all of that. We know, like, using census data is fine if you are in a very specific zip code or area where census data is available. But use survey data when you can, or talk about how you are going to be implementing surveys in the future, what you will be looking for if you're not doing it right now just yet. Give as much quantitative info as you can capture about your audience and your participants. Also, paint a picture of who your audience is, where they come from, why they attend or participate in your events. This doesn't have to be just all dry stats. We want to learn about you and your audience. Help panelists understand how you reach out to audiences and provide programs and services. If you've made changes that speak to your cultural equity vision, highlight those in your response. Also, how do you determine what your programming will entail each season, or what arts projects you're going to be investing in? Is your organization using survey data? Do you ask your attendees how they felt, what they want to see, and not just attendees, but participants? Are you engaging them in the decision-making about the programs you provide? The panel will want to understand how you determine what is important to this community or audience that you're describing. Also, make sure you're articulating your commitment to cultural equity and how you're addressing this in with your community and audience. If you have any new outreach programs, we want to hear about that, and how have you introduced new ways to reach new community members? All of that is really important. Okay, so some real high-level pro tips. Read the guidelines. They are linked on our website. I will put a link into the chat in a moment. Definitely make sure that, keep in mind, you are the subject matter of your organization and you are just introducing us to the work you do. If you are a returning applicant, you're going to have some boilerplate at the ready, but no panelist reviewing this set of applications has access to any of your former applications. So each year is a brand new year with a brand new set of panelists, and you have to paint the full picture. You can't rest on your laurels of prior year applications. Use the application to make a lasting impression. Assume panelists don't know you, and you need to really paint that picture of who you are, what your mission is, why it is important for you and the community you're being served. Okay. So a little bit on the timeline. The applications are due October 1st, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. Don't wait until that last minute. I sign off for the day during normal business hours. So you're not going to get anyone on email or on phone to be able to assist you at 11:58 at night. So just keep that in mind. As I mentioned, staff will review all submitted and complete applications for eligibility. We do that this winter, and then we figure out how many applications are moving on to panel review. The panels generally take place in February. We anticipate having 6 or more panels this year. In prior cycles, there had been 4 or 5 panels, and then this last year we had a full 6 panels. As the program grows, as more people hear about it and apply to the program, it requires more panels, and that also means there is very likely a larger pool of grants being awarded. So keep that in mind, because the $750,000 is static as of now. We have not received any indication that the board will be increasing that amount. So if more applications are awarded funding, that means each individual organization is receiving a slightly less of the grant amount. And then in July of 2025, we will announce the awards and begin the contracting process. And then the timeline, like I said, is July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. The project that you are proposing needs to fit within that timeline. Okay. Now I'll go back and answer any last questions that you all have. Keep in mind that you are welcome to email me anytime, ciag@arts.lacounty.gov.